They say love hits you when you least expect it. But nobody tells you that sometimes it hits you like a freight train, carrying all your worst fears and deepest desires wrapped up in a smile that makes you forget your own name. Let me tell you about Marcus Wellington, a man who had everything except the one thing that mattered, and how he found it in the most impossible place, with the most impossible woman, at the most impossible time. It was a Tuesday morning in October, the kind of gray Seattle day that makes you question every life choice that brought you to the Pacific Northwest. Marcus sat in his black Bentley outside the offices of Wellington Tech Dynamics, staring at his phone screen displaying a notification that should have made him euphoric. Deal closed, $347 million. $347 million, the largest acquisition in his company's history. A deal that would cement his position as one of the most successful tech entrepreneurs under 40. His father would finally stop making those disappointed comments about squandering the family legacy. The board would stop questioning his unconventional strategies. The financial press would write glowing profiles about his vision and brilliance. So why did he feel like he was drowning? Marcus pressed his palms against his eyes, trying to push away the familiar wave of emptiness that seemed to crash over him after every major victory. This was what success was supposed to feel like, wasn't it? This hollow, echoing sensation, like winning a game nobody had told him he didn't want to play. His phone buzzed with congratulatory messages. His assistant had scheduled champagne toasts with the board. His publicist wanted to arrange interviews. Everyone wanted to celebrate, and Marcus wanted to disappear. That's when he looked up and saw her. Through the rain-streaked window of a coffee shop called Been There, Done That, wedged between a vintage bookstore with faded awnings and a record shop that looked like it had been transported from 1970, he glimpsed something that made his breath catch in his throat. A woman with auburn hair escaping from a messy bun, flour dusting her dark green apron, throwing her head back in laughter at something a customer had said. There was something about that laugh, completely unguarded, purely joyful, the kind of sound that suggested she'd never had to calculate the social or professional impact of her emotions. Marcus Wellington, who commanded boardrooms and made decisions that affected thousands of jobs, who owned properties on 3 continents and art that museums tried to buy from him, found himself sitting in his car like a teenager working up the courage to talk to his crush. The rain was falling harder now, drumming against the Bentley's roof like impatient fingers. Marcus watched other customers hurry in and out of the coffee shop, shaking droplets from umbrellas and coats, everyone moving with the efficient urgency of people who had important places to be. Everyone except the woman behind the counter, who moved with a different kind of purpose, graceful, deliberate, like she was exactly where she belonged. He'd been sitting there for almost 10 minutes when she looked up and caught him staring. Even through the rain and window glass, Marcus felt the impact of her gaze like a physical thing. She tilted her head slightly, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth, and raised one eyebrow in a universal expression that clearly said, "Are you coming in? Or are you just going to sit out there all day looking lost?" Marcus had faced down hostile takeover attempts, government investigations, and rooms full of investors who smelled blood in the water. But walking the 30 feet from his car to that coffee shop door felt like the bravest thing he'd ever done. The bell above the door chimed as he entered, and suddenly he was enveloped in warmth that was more than just temperature. The scent of roasted coffee beans and cinnamon, the soft hum of conversation, the kind of atmosphere that made you want to stay for hours with a good book and nowhere else to be. "What can I get started for you?" she asked, and her voice had this slight rasp to it, like she'd spent the previous evening singing along to music turned up too loud, or reading poetry aloud to an empty room, or arguing passionately about something she cared about deeply. Up close, she was even more striking. Not beautiful in the polished, calculated way of the women Marcus usually dated, women who looked like they'd stepped out of magazine spreads, who never had hair out of place or opinions that might make anyone uncomfortable. This woman looked real, lived in. Her name tag read Elena, and there was a small scar above her left eyebrow, a dusting of freckles across her nose, laugh lines around green eyes that seemed to see too much. "I'll have..." Marcus paused, realizing he had no idea what he wanted. His usual order was whatever his assistant picked up from the corporate coffee cart, something efficient and caffeinated and utterly forgettable. "Whatever you recommend." Elena studied him with an intensity that made Marcus feel exposed, like she was reading some story written across his face that he hadn't known he was telling. Her gaze took in his perfectly pressed charcoal suit, his Italian leather shoes, the expensive watch that had been a gift to himself after his first major acquisition. But she wasn't looking at these things with the calculation he was used to, not trying to assess his net worth or social status. She was looking at him like she was trying to figure out what was hurting him. "You look like you need something strong, but with enough sweetness to remind you that not everything in life has to be bitter," she said finally. "And something warm, because you're carrying around a lot of cold spaces inside you." Marcus stared at her. "How could you possibly..." "Lucky guess," Elena said with a gentle smile. "Plus, you've got that I just achieved everything I thought I wanted and feel more empty than ever look. I see it a lot in this neighborhood." As she moved behind the espresso machine, Marcus found himself mesmerized by her hands. They were small but sure, with short, practical nails and a thin silver ring on her right index finger. There was something almost hypnotic about the way she worked, measuring, grinding, steaming, like she was performing a ritual instead of just making coffee. "You know," she said over the hiss of the espresso machine, "most people think coffee is just caffeine delivery, but it's really about the pause. The moment where you stop rushing toward whatever you think you need to achieve next and just exist. Just taste something good and be present for 30 seconds. Well, I can't remember the last time I was present for 30 seconds, Marcus admitted, surprised by his own honesty. Elena glanced up at him, foam wand in hand. "That's the saddest thing I've heard all week. And yesterday a customer told me his dog learned how to open doors and now escapes to roll in garbage." Despite everything, the weight of the morning's deal, the familiar emptiness, the strange vulnerability of standing in this unfamiliar place, Marcus laughed, actually laughed, not the practiced chuckle he used in business meetings, but something real and surprised. There we go, Elena said, satisfaction in her voice. I was starting to wonder if you remembered how... She handed him a cup, and when their fingers brushed, Marcus felt something electric shoot up his arm. Not just attraction, though there was definitely that, but recognition. Like some part of him that had been holding its breath for years had suddenly remembered how to exhale. The coffee was perfect, complex and warming, with notes of maple and a hint of something smoky that made him think of autumn evenings and fireplaces and all the cozy things his minimalist penthouse apartment completely lacked. First one's on the house, Elena said. You look like you could use some kindness today. Why? Marcus asked, genuinely curious. You don't know anything about me. Elena leaned her elbows on the counter, bringing them to eye level. I know you're successful. I know you're probably very good at whatever you do. I know you drove here in something expensive and that your clothes cost more than most people make in a month. But I also know you've been sitting in your car for 10 minutes looking like someone who's forgotten why any of it matters. Oh. Marcus felt something crack open in his chest. What if I have? Then maybe it's time to figure out what does matter, Elena said simply, starting with whether you want another one of these tomorrow. Marcus left that coffee shop feeling more awake than he had in months, and it had nothing to do with the caffeine. For the rest of the day, through board meetings and congratulatory calls and interviews with financial reporters, he found his mind returning to green eyes and gentle challenges and the way Elena had looked at him like he was a puzzle worth solving. That night, alone in his penthouse apartment with its floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Elliott Bay, Marcus stood in his kitchen holding the empty coffee cup. He'd meant to throw it away, but somehow couldn't bring himself to do it. Instead, he found himself reading the message Elena had written on the side in careful script. Every ending is just a beginning wearing a disguise. The next morning, Marcus woke up thinking about coffee. Not just any coffee, that specific coffee, made by those specific hands, accompanied by that specific smile. He told himself it was ridiculous. He was 36 years old, worth more than some small country's GDP, and he was mooning over a barista like a college freshman with his first crush. But when 8:30 arrived, Marcus found himself walking through the door of Being There. Done that for the second time in 2 days. Elena looked up from the register where she was helping another customer, and her face lit up with such genuine pleasure that Marcus felt his heart skip. Maple bourbon latte? She called out before he'd even reached the counter. You remember? I remember everything about yesterday, Elena said, and there was something in her tone that made Marcus wonder if she meant more than just his coffee order. This time, while she made his drink, they talked. Elena asked him about his work, and Marcus found himself giving her a more honest answer than he'd given anyone in years. I build things, he said. Software, mostly. Systems that help other systems work better. But lately, I'm not sure if I'm building anything that actually matters. What would matter? Elena asked, not looking up from the espresso machine. The question caught Marcus off guard. I don't know. Something that made people's lives better instead of just more efficient. Something that solved real problems instead of creating new ones. So why don't you? Because it's not that simple. Because I have shareholders and employees and responsibilities. Because the market doesn't care about my philosophical crisis. Elena handed him his coffee, and this time she'd written something different on the cup. The market isn't your life. Your life is your life. Very profound for 8:30 in the morning, Marcus said, but he was smiling. I'm full of profound thoughts, Elena replied. Yesterday I had a 15-minute internal debate about whether putting oat milk in coffee is a sign of human progress or the decline of civilization. And what did you conclude? That anyone who argues about milk alternatives has too much time on their hands and not enough real problems. Elena grinned, which might include me. Marcus found himself lingering, even though he had a meeting at 9. What about you? What's your story? Something flickered across Elena's face, too quick to interpret. But there, nothing as exciting as yours. I dropped out of college a few years ago when my mom got sick. Been working here ever since. What were you studying? Computer science, Elena said, and there was a wistfulness in her voice that suggested she missed it more than she wanted to admit. Do you ever think about going back? Every day. But life doesn't always give you the luxury of pursuing your dreams on your own timeline. Marcus wanted to ask more. About her mother. About her dreams. About the shadow that had crossed her face when he'd asked about her story. But something in her posture suggested the subject was closed, at least for now. Well, he said instead, if you ever want to talk about computer science with someone who thinks about it professionally, I'd be happy to listen. Elena's smile was soft and grateful. I might take you up on that someday. By the end of the week, Marcus had established a routine. Every morning at 8:30, he walked into Billionaire. Done that. Elena would have his maple bourbon latte ready, always with a new message written on the side. They would talk while she worked. About books, about music, about the strange characters who frequented the coffee shop, about everything except the careful boundaries they'd both drawn around certain subjects. Marcus learned that Elena had strong opinions about fair trade coffee sourcing, that she read voraciously across multiple genres, that she had a playlist for every mood, and could recommend the perfect song for any emotional situation. He learned that she was funny in unexpected ways, that she noticed details most people missed, that she had a gift for making everyone who walked through the door feel like they mattered. What he didn't learn was why someone with her obvious intelligence was working in a coffee shop, why she sometimes got a haunted look when certain news stories came on the radio, or why she always paid for everything in cash and seemed to avoid having her picture taken. Elena, for her part, was gradually drawing Marcus out of his shell. She recommended books that made him think differently about success and purpose. She introduced him to music that made him feel 17 again. She asked him questions about his work that pushed him to examine his motivations and values in ways he'd been avoiding for years. "You know your company's facial recognition software is being used by authoritarian governments to track dissidents?" she asked one morning, scrolling through news articles on her ancient laptop while the morning rush died down. Marcus paused with his coffee halfway to his lips. "That's not what we intended it for." "But it's what it's being used for. Does intent matter if the impact is surveillance and oppression? We can't control how every client uses our technology." Elena looked up at him with those green eyes that saw too much. "Can't or don't want to, because there's a difference." These conversations left Marcus unsettled in the best possible way. Elena was challenging him to think beyond profit margins and market share, to consider the human cost of technological progress. She was making him ask questions he'd been avoiding about legacy and responsibility and what it meant to build something worthwhile. It was a Wednesday morning in November when Marcus finally worked up the courage to ask Elena out properly. He'd been rehearsing different approaches for days, running scenarios in his head like he was preparing for a crucial board presentation. The coffee shop was quieter than usual, the morning rush having passed without the usual chaos. Elena was restocking supplies behind the counter, humming something soft and melodic that Marcus didn't recognize but wished he could bottle and take with him. "Elena," he said, his usual confidence nowhere to be found. "I was wondering, would you maybe want to have dinner with me, somewhere that isn't here?" Elena stopped mid-hum, a bag of coffee beans frozen in her hands. She turned to look at him, and Marcus saw something vulnerable flicker across her face. "Like a date?" she asked quietly. "Like a date, For a long moment, Elena was silent, and Marcus felt his heart hammering against his ribs like it was trying to escape. He'd negotiated multi-million-dollar deals with less anxiety than this simple question was causing him. "I'd like that," Elena said finally, and her smile was different from any he'd seen before, softer, more hesitant, like she was offering him something precious and fragile. "But Marcus, there are things about me you don't know, things that might change how you feel about this, What kind of things?" Elena glanced around the coffee shop, checking to make sure no other customers were within earshot. When she looked back at him, there was something almost desperate in her eyes. "Can you meet me after I close tonight? 8 o'clock? There's something I need to tell you before this goes any further. Something important." The rest of the day dragged by like a year. Marcus tried to focus on work, on the quarterly projections that needed his review, on the merger negotiations with a German competitor that could expand Wellington Tech's European presence by 30%. But his mind kept circling back to Elena's words, to the fear he'd glimpsed in her eyes. What could she possibly need to tell him that required such secrecy? Was she married? Divorced? Did she have children she hadn't mentioned? Was she in some kind of trouble? By 7:30, Marcus was pacing outside Bean There, done that like an expectant father. The October evening was crisp, with the kind of clarity that made the city lights look like scattered diamonds. Through the coffee shop's windows, he could see Elena moving efficiently through her closing routine, counting the register, wiping down tables, restocking for the morning shift. She'd changed out of her work apron into dark jeans and a soft cream sweater that made her skin look luminous in the warm light. Her hair was down for once, falling in loose waves around her shoulders, and Marcus felt his breath catch at how beautiful she looked when she wasn't hiding behind the cheerful professionalism of customer service. At exactly 8 o'clock, Elena emerged from the shop, keys jangling in her hand. She looked nervous, more nervous than Marcus had ever seen her. "There's a park a few blocks away," she said. "We can walk there." They moved through the evening streets in silence, their footsteps echoing off wet pavement. The city felt different at this hour, quieter, more intimate, like it was keeping secrets. Elena led him to a small park overlooking the Sound, where a single bench sat under an old oak tree whose leaves were just beginning to turn gold. Elena sat down heavily, like she was carrying an invisible weight. Marcus settled beside her, close enough to catch the faint scent of vanilla and coffee that seemed to follow her everywhere. "My name is Elena," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "But that's about the only completely true thing you know about me." Marcus felt something cold and sharp settle in his stomach. "What do you mean?" Elena took a shuddering breath. 5 years ago, I was one of the most wanted hackers in the country. They called me Phantom because I could get into any system without leaving a trace. Corporate databases, government servers, military networks, financial institutions. If it had a firewall, I could find a way through it. The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. He opened his mouth to respond, but no sound came out. "I was 19 years old," Elena continued, tears starting to gather in her eyes. "My mother had been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, and our insurance company kept denying her treatments. Not because they weren't medically necessary, but because they were expensive and she was technically still within her deductible period from a previous hospital stay. They were essentially sentencing her to death over paperwork." Marcus found his voice. "So you hacked them?" "I broke into their system and changed her approval status. Made sure she got the chemotherapy she needed, the specialist consultations, the experimental treatments that might have saved her life." Elena's hands were shaking now. "And for a few months, it worked. She got better. The cancer went into remission. I thought I'd beaten the system. But the high was intoxicating. The rush of breaking through defenses, of being invisible and powerful at the same time, of taking from people who had too much and giving to people who had nothing. I couldn't stop." Elena wiped at her eyes with the back of her hand. "I told myself I was Robin Hood. I was exposing corruption, helping people who couldn't help themselves, fighting against injustice. But really, I was just addicted to the power." Marcus stared at her, trying to reconcile the woman who made perfect coffee and quoted literature with this revelation. "What happened to your mother?" Elena's face crumpled. "The cancer came back. Stronger, more aggressive, and all those treatments I'd stolen for her. They bought us 8 extra months together. 8 months of hope and laughter and believing we'd found a miracle. Then she died anyway, and I was left with this skill set, that felt more like a curse than a gift. Elena. I spiraled after that, she said, her voice growing stronger with the telling. Started taking bigger risks, going after bigger targets. Defense contractors hiding safety violations. Pharmaceutical companies suppressing drug trial data. Government agencies covering up environmental disasters. I was angry at the whole world, and hacking was the only way I knew how to fight back. How did you end up here? Elena was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the lights reflecting on the dark water. I made a mistake, got overconfident. Tried to expose a defense contractor that was selling faulty equipment to the military. Equipment that was getting soldiers killed. But it was a trap. They'd been tracking me for months, and I walked right into it. A trap? The FBI had been building a case against the hacker underground for years. They knew Phantom was real, but they couldn't find me. So they set up a honeypot, fake evidence of corruption that was too tempting for me to ignore. When I took the bait, they had me. Marcus felt like the world was tilting sideways. Did they arrest you? They tried, but I had contingency plans. Back doors into a dozen government systems. Encrypted files that would have exposed massive corruption if anything happened to me. And I had help from someone on the inside. Someone on the inside? Elena turned to look at him directly for the first time since they'd sat down. A federal agent named David Chen. He'd been investigating the same defense contractor I was targeting through official channels. He believed that I was trying to do the right thing, even if I was doing it the wrong way. When the trap was sprung, he helped me escape. Why would he do that? Because he believed in second chances. Because he thought someone with my skills could do more good on the right side of the law than rotting in federal prison. And because... Elena's voice broke slightly. Because he'd lost his own daughter to cancer. And he understood what grief could drive someone to do. They sat in silence for several minutes. Marcus could hear traffic in the distance. The sound of the city breathing around them. He thought about all their conversations, all the small moments that had made him fall for her. How much of it had been real? So Elena Martinez isn't your real name, he said finally. Oh. Elena Singh. And yes, Elena is my real first name. The coffee shop knows me as Elena Martinez, former art student who dropped out to care for her sick mother. It's close enough to the truth to feel real most of the time. And the computer science background you mentioned? That part was completely true. I was a CS major at UC Berkeley before everything happened. I was actually on track to graduate summa cum laude. Elena's smile was bitter. Funny how life takes you in directions you never planned. Marcus felt like he was looking at her through new eyes. The careful way she handled money, the ancient laptop, the fact that she'd never taken a selfie or posted anything on social media, it all made sense now. Why are you telling me this? He asked. Elena turned to face him fully, and in the amber glow of the streetlights, he could see tears streaming down her face. Because I'm falling in love with you, she said, her voice raw with emotion. Because I can't keep lying to you, pretending to be someone I'm not. Because you deserve to know who you're getting involved with before you get in too deep to escape. Marcus felt his heart stop and restart. Elena. And because I think someone knows who I really am. What do you mean? Elena wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly looking smaller and more vulnerable than he'd ever seen her. Strange things have been happening lately. Customers asking odd questions about my background, someone following me home from work, always staying just far enough away that I can't be sure, but close enough that I know they're there. Phone calls with no one on the other end. My apartment door being unlocked when I'm sure I locked it. Marcus felt ice forming in his veins. Elena, if someone is threatening you, I don't know if they're threatening me or just watching, waiting. But 5 years of looking over your shoulder teaches you to trust your instincts. And every instinct I have is screaming that my time as Elena Martinez is running out. We need to call the police, the FBI, someone who... No. Elena's response was immediate and firm. The moment we involve official channels, everything David Chen did to protect me unravels. Elena Martinez disappears, and Elena Singh becomes a federal fugitive again. I can't risk that. Then what do we do? Elena stood up abruptly, pacing to the edge of the bench and back. I don't know. I've been asking myself that question for weeks. Do I run again? Try to disappear into another identity in another city? Do I stay and fight, hoping that whoever's watching me decides I'm not worth the trouble? Do I? She looked at him with something that might have been hope. Do I trust that maybe, for the first time in 5 years, I don't have to face this alone? Marcus stood and reached for her hands, which were ice cold despite the mild evening. You don't have to face anything alone. Not anymore. Marcus, you don't understand what you're saying. If someone is coming after me, they'll come after everyone connected to me. Your company, your reputation, your safety, all of it could be at risk just from knowing me. I don't care. You should care. You should run as far and as fast as you can from this mess. Elena. Marcus cupped her face in his hands, forcing her to look at him. I don't care about any of that. I care about you. The woman who quotes poetry on coffee cups and argues about ethical sourcing and challenges me to be better than I am. I care about the person who's brave enough to tell me a truth that could destroy everything between us. But what if... What if what? What if loving you is complicated? What if it's dangerous? What if it changes everything about my safe, predictable life? Marcus smiled, and for the first time since she'd started talking, Elena saw something other than fear in his eyes. Elena Singh, I've been living in a glass house for so long that I'd forgotten what it felt like to have something worth protecting. If someone wants to come after us, let them come. We'll face it together. Elena searched his face, looking for any sign that he was just saying what he thought she wanted to hear. But Marcus had never been good at lying, and what she saw in his expression was absolute sincerity. You're serious, she whispered. Dead serious. But Elena, if we're going to do this, really do this, I need you to tell me everything. No more secrets, no more half-truths. I need to know what we're up against. Elena took a shuddering breath. There's more. Of course there was more. When I disappeared 5 years ago, I didn't just vanish into thin air. David Chen told me that the only way to stay safe was to make sure my death would be more dangerous than my life. So before I became Elena Martinez, I created an insurance policy. What kind of insurance policy? A database, encrypted, distributed across multiple secure servers that I set up before going underground. Financial records, communication logs, classified documents, enough evidence of corruption to trigger congressional investigations, destroy political careers, and send dozens of very powerful people to federal prison. Marcus stared at her. You've been sitting on something like that for 5 years? It was never meant to be used. The whole point was that it would never see the light of day unless someone tried to hurt me. Mutual assured destruction. They leave me alone, and their secrets stay buried. And you think someone found out about it? I think someone got nervous. Maybe they heard rumors. Maybe they connected Elena Martinez to Elena Singh. Maybe they just decided that 5 years was long enough to wait. Elena's voice was growing stronger. Like talking about the technical aspects was easier than dwelling on the emotional ones. Whoever's watching me, they're not amateurs. They're patient, methodical, professional. The kind of people who have the resources to track down a ghost. What happens if they find you? Best case scenario, they try to make a deal, my silence in exchange for my safety. Worst case. Elena didn't finish the sentence. Marcus felt anger building in his chest, not at Elena, but at the faceless people who had driven her into hiding, who were threatening the first real happiness he'd found in years. What do you need? He asked. What? To feel safe, to fight back, to make this go away. What do you need? Elena looked at him like he'd just spoken a foreign language. Marcus, this isn't your fight. Like hell it isn't. You just told me you're in love with me. That makes it my fight. For the first time since they'd sat down, Elena smiled. Not her practiced customer service smile, but something real and wondering. I can't ask you to. You're not asking. I'm offering. Money, lawyers, security, whatever it takes. We figure this out together. Elena was quiet for a long moment, studying his face in the dim light. You know what the really crazy part is? What? For 5 years, I've been telling myself that I was protecting other people by staying isolated, that caring about someone, letting someone care about me, would just put them in danger. But sitting here with you, knowing that someone might be coming for me, not scared for me anymore. I'm scared for you. Elena. I'm scared that loving me is going to destroy your life. I'm scared that I'm being selfish by not walking away right now. And I'm scared that even knowing all of that, I don't want to lose you. Marcus pulled her against him then, wrapping his arms around her like he could shield her from everything that was hunting her. She felt small and warm and precious, and he made a silent promise to whatever gods might be listening that he would not let anyone hurt her. "You're not going to lose me," he whispered into her hair. "And you're not going to destroy my life. Anything. You're the first thing that's made my life feel worth living in years." Elena pulled back just enough to look at him. "You really mean that?" "I really mean that." She stood on her tiptoes and kissed him then, soft and desperate, and tasting like tears and coffee and possibilities. When they broke apart, both of them were breathing hard. "So what happens now?" Elena asked. "Now we go back to your apartment. We order terrible takeout, and we figure out how to keep you safe. And tomorrow, I take you to dinner at that Italian place you mentioned, and we start building something real together." "Just like that?" "Just like that, Elena laughed, and it was watery but genuine. "You know, for a billionaire tech mogul, you make it sound pretty simple." "Maybe it is simple. Maybe we've been overthinking it. Or maybe we're about to make everything infinitely more complicated." Marcus grinned. "Well, I've never been afraid of complicated." Hand in hand, they walked back through the Seattle streets toward Elena's apartment, toward whatever challenges were waiting for them, toward a future that neither of them could predict, but both of them were finally brave enough to try to build together. Neither of them noticed the figure watching from the shadows across the street, or the camera that captured their faces in the amber glow of the streetlights. The first attack came not with violence, but with a phone call at 6:30 on a Tuesday morning, 3 weeks after Elena had told Marcus her truth. Marcus was in Elena's tiny kitchen, attempting to make pancakes while she showered, humming off-key and occasionally calling out suggestions about proper batter consistency. And it was domestic and perfect, and exactly the kind of simple happiness Marcus had never known he wanted. They'd spent those 3 weeks learning how to be together in the real world. Elena had met Marcus's assistant, his driver, his housekeeper, all under the carefully constructed identity of Elena Martinez, art student turned coffee entrepreneur. Marcus had learned to navigate Elena's neighborhood, to appreciate hole-in-the-wall restaurants, and used bookstores and the particular pleasure of anonymity. More importantly, they'd learned to trust each other. Elena had shown Marcus some of her old code, explaining the elegant logic behind seemingly impossible digital break-ins. Marcus had shown Elena the ethically questionable contracts that had built his fortune, listening as she helped him understand the human cost of technological progress. "You know," Elena had said one evening, scrolling through Wellington Tech's client list, "you could probably divest from about 40% of these contracts without significantly impacting your revenue. The morally problematic ones tend to be lower margin anyway." "You've been thinking about this." "I've been thinking about a lot of things, including whether someone with my background could ever work for a legitimate tech company again." "Are you saying you want to?" Elena had been quiet for a long moment, I'm saying that for the first time in 5 years, I can imagine a future where I'm not just surviving, where I'm actually building something good. That conversation had happened just the night before. Marcus was still thinking about it, about the possibility of Elena joining Wellington Tech in some capacity, when his phone rang. The caller ID showed his CFO, Richard Park. Marcus frowned. Richard knew better than to call this early unless something was seriously wrong. "Marcus, you need to get down here immediately." Richard's voice was tight with barely controlled panic. "We've been hacked." The pancakes burned while Marcus stood frozen in Elena's kitchen, his phone pressed to his ear like it might deliver better news if he held it tighter. "What do you mean, hacked?" "Someone broke into our main servers overnight. They've accessed everything: client data, financial records, proprietary algorithms, trade secrets, the works. Our entire digital infrastructure has been compromised." Marcus felt ice forming in his veins. "How bad is it?" "Bad enough that our stock is going to crater when the market opens. Bad enough that we're looking at lawsuits from every major client. Bad enough that the FBI is already asking questions." Richard's voice cracked. "Marcus, whoever did this didn't just steal our data. They sabotaged our systems. Half our servers are corrupted. Our backup protocols have been compromised. And they left a message." "What kind of message?" "Phantom sends her regards." The phone slipped from Marcus's suddenly nerveless fingers, clattering onto Elena's kitchen counter. He stared at it like it was a snake that had just bitten him, his mind struggling to process what he'd heard. "Phantom sends her regards." Elena emerged from the bathroom, hair wrapped in a towel, humming something soft and off-key. She took one look at his face and stopped dead. "What happened?" Marcus picked up the phone with shaking hands. "Richard, I'm on my way." "Marcus, there's more. The hack triggered automatic security protocols with our government clients. There are already 3 separate federal investigations being launched. And the media." Richard's voice was barely controlled. "Someone leaked the story to TechCrunch. We're going to be front-page news in an hour." The line went dead. Elena was watching him with growing alarm. "Marcus, talk to me. What's happening?" "My company was hacked last night," Marcus said, his voice coming out flat and strange. "The hacker left a message. Phantom sends her regards." Elena went very still. "That's impossible." "Is it?" "Marcus, I haven't touched a computer system illegally in 5 years. I swore to David Chen that I wouldn't, and I've kept that promise." "Then who?" Elena sank into one of her mismatched kitchen chairs, the towel slipping from her hair. "Oh God. Oh God, I think I know. Elena, talk to me." Her face had gone pale, and when she looked up at him, Marcus saw something in her eyes that terrified him. Not just fear, but guilt. "There was another hacker in our old crew. someone I worked with occasionally before everything went to hell. We called him Mirror because he could perfectly replicate anyone's digital signature, make it look like someone else had done the work. Elena's hands were shaking. If someone wanted to frame me for something, why would someone want to frame you? Elena wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly looking fragile in a way that made Marcus want to hit something. Because 5 years ago, when I disappeared, I didn't just take that insurance database with me. I took something else, something that belonged to someone very dangerous. Marcus felt like he was falling. What did you take? $50 million, Elena whispered. From the defense contractor that set the trap for me. David Chen said I needed seed money to disappear completely, to build a new identity that could withstand scrutiny. So in the 30 seconds between realizing it was a trap and running for my life, I cleaned out their offshore accounts. Marcus stared at her. You stole $50 million. I told myself it was justified. They were selling faulty equipment that was getting soldiers killed. They'd just tried to destroy my life. They had more money than some small countries. Elena's voice was getting smaller. But really, I was just angry and scared, and I wanted to hurt them the way they'd hurt me. Whose money was it? A private military contractor called Blackstone Defense. They specialize in cybersecurity for government agencies, weapons systems, surveillance technology. The kind of company that has contracts with agencies that officially don't exist. Marcus felt cold understanding wash over him. The kind of company that doesn't forgive $50 million thefts. The kind of company that has the resources to track down a ghost and the patience to wait 5 years for revenge. Elena confirmed. I think they found me, Marcus. And I think they're using me to destroy you. Marcus's phone rang again. Richard. Marcus, it's getting worse. The hacker didn't just steal data, they planted evidence. False financial records showing that Wellington Tech has been selling classified technology to foreign governments. Corporate communications that make it look like we've been violating export restrictions for years. It's all fake, but it looks real. Real enough that the FBI is treating this as a national security issue. Richard, I need you to. There's more. Someone leaked everything to the press. Not just the hack, but the planted evidence. The Wall Street Journal is running a story in 20 minutes about Wellington Tech being investigated for treason. Our stock is going to be suspended from trading. The phone went dead again. Elena was watching him with tears streaming down her face. I did this to you. I brought this into your life. And now they're going to destroy everything you've built. Elena, no. Yes. She stood up abruptly, pacing to the window and back. Don't you see? This is exactly what I was afraid of. Blackstone found me. And they're using me as a weapon against you. They know I care about you. So they're making sure that loving me costs you everything. Marcus felt anger building in his chest. Not at Elena, but at the faceless people who were trying to destroy them both. We fight back. How? With what? They have unlimited resources, government connections, the ability to make evidence appear and disappear at will. What do we have? We have the truth." Elena laughed bitterly. "The truth? The truth is that I'm a hacker and a thief who stole $50 million from dangerous people. The truth is that I've been lying about who I am for 5 years. The truth is that everything good in my life comes at the cost of someone else's destruction. That's not true. Isn't it? My mother got her treatments because I stole them. I've been safe for 5 years because David Chen broke federal law to help me disappear. And now you're going to lose your company because I was selfish enough to think I deserved happiness." Marcus crossed the kitchen in 2 strides and grabbed her hands, forcing her to look at him. "Elena Singh, you listen to me. I don't care what you've done. I don't care what you've taken. I don't care if loving you costs me everything I own. You are not responsible for other people's evil choices. Oh. But. No buts. Blackstone Defense chose to sell faulty equipment. They chose to try to destroy you when you exposed them. They chose to hunt you down 5 years later. They chose to attack my company. You didn't make them do any of that." Elena searched his face, looking for any sign that he was just saying what he thought she wanted to hear. "You're going to lose everything. Maybe. Or maybe we find a way to fight back. But either way, we do it together." "Marcus, you don't understand. If I stay, if I try to help you fight this, I'll just make it worse. The only way to protect you is for me to disappear again." "Like hell. It's the only way." "No." Marcus's voice was firm, final. Running away didn't solve anything 5 years ago. And it won't solve anything now. If Blackstone wants a fight, we give them a fight. Elena pulled her hands free, wrapping her arms around herself again. "You don't know what you're asking. I'm asking you to trust me, trust us, trust that maybe, for once, the good guys can win." Elena was quiet for a long moment, staring out the window at the Seattle morning. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "What if we can't win? Then we go down fighting together." Elena turned to look at him, and Marcus saw something shift in her expression. The fear was still there, but underneath it was something else: determination. "If we're going to do this," she said slowly, "really do this, there are some things you need to know about the insurance database, about what I took from Blackstone, about why they want me so badly." "I'm listening." Elena took a deep breath. The $50 million was just the beginning. For the next hour, while Marcus's phone rang constantly with calls from lawyers and board members and federal agents, Elena told him the rest of her story. The insurance database she'd created wasn't just evidence of corporate corruption. It was a comprehensive map of a conspiracy that reached into the highest levels of government. Defense contractors selling weapons to both sides of international conflicts. Pharmaceutical companies suppressing drug trials that showed their products caused cancer. Energy companies covering up environmental disasters that had killed thousands of people. "I spent 2 years compiling it," Elena explained. her fingers flying over her laptop keyboard as she showed Marcus encrypted file directories that looked like digital spider webs. Every hack I did, every system I broke into, I was building a bigger picture. I thought I was just exposing individual cases of corruption, but what I was really documenting was a network. What kind of network? People who'd decided that profit was more important than human life. Defense contractors, pharmaceutical executives, energy company CEOs, the politicians they'd bought, the regulators they'd corrupted. All connected, all protecting each other, all getting rich while people died. Marcus stared at the screen. This is enough to bring down 2 presidential administrations, trigger congressional investigations that would last for decades, and send hundreds of very powerful people to federal prison. Elena finished. Which is why Blackstone wants it so badly. They're not just worried about their $50 million, they're worried about everything else I know. But you've never used it. Never. David Chen made me promise that it would only see the light of day if someone tried to kill me. And until now, the threat of mutual destruction has been enough to keep me safe. What's changed? Elena was quiet for a moment, scrolling through news articles on her laptop. I think someone decided that discrediting me was safer than killing me. If they can make me look like a criminal, a terrorist, someone whose evidence can't be trusted, then the database becomes worthless. By destroying my company and framing you for it. By making it look like I'm still actively hacking, still committing crimes, still the dangerous terrorist the FBI was hunting 5 years ago. If Elena Singh is back to her old tricks, then anything she might say about Blackstone or anyone else is just the desperate lies of a caught criminal. Marcus felt pieces clicking into place. That's why they used your signature. They want everyone to know Phantom is back. And when the FBI inevitably tracks Elena Singh to Elena Martinez, they'll find a woman who's been lying about her identity, working under a false name, romantically involved with the CEO of the company she supposedly hacked. Elena's smile was bitter. It's actually brilliant. They destroy you, discredit me, and eliminate the threat of my evidence all in one move. Ooh. So what do we do? Elena closed her laptop and looked at him with something that might have been hope. We beat them at their own game. Meaning we proved that someone else hacked Wellington Tech. We exposed the conspiracy to frame me, and we make Blackstone's worst nightmare come true. Which is? Elena's smile was sharp and dangerous, and for a moment Marcus caught a glimpse of the woman who'd once been one of the most feared hackers in the country. We release everything. The next 72 hours were the longest of Marcus's life. While federal agents swarmed Wellington Tech's offices, while lawyers fielded calls from panicked clients, while the financial press wrote obituaries for his company, Marcus and Elena worked in the shadows to uncover the truth. Elena's technical skills, dormant for 5 years, came flooding back like riding a bicycle. She showed Marcus how to trace digital fingerprints, how to identify the unique signatures that every hacker left behind, how to distinguish between real evidence and sophisticated forgeries. "Look at this," she said, pointing at lines of code on her laptop screen. The malware that infected your servers. It's good, but it's not perfect. Whoever wrote it was trying to mimic my style, but they made small mistakes, different variable naming conventions, slightly different approaches to encryption. It's like someone trying to forge a painting by copying the brushstrokes, but missing the underlying philosophy. Can you prove it wasn't you? Better than that. I can prove who it actually was. Elena's fingers flew over the keyboard, pulling up databases that Marcus was pretty sure civilians weren't supposed to have access to. She cross-referenced coding styles, traced server routes, identified digital signatures that had been carefully hidden, but not quite carefully enough. Mirror, she said finally. Real name Thomas Chen, no relation to David. He's been working for private security firms since our old crew disbanded. Guess who one of his biggest clients is? Blackstone Defense. Blackstone Defense. And guess what he's been paid to do for the last 6 months? Marcus looked at the financial records Elena had somehow accessed. Develop malware targeting specific corporate infrastructures. Specifically, malware designed to mimic the signature of a hacker who's been inactive for 5 years. They had their proof, but proof wasn't enough. Elena's evidence was obtained through illegal means, hacking into Blackstone's servers, accessing federal databases, breaking about 30 different computer crime laws. None of it would be admissible in court, and using it would only confirm Elena's identity as Phantom. There has to be another way, Marcus said. Elena was quiet for a long moment, staring at her laptop screen. When she spoke, her voice was very soft. Well, there is, but you're not going to like it. What? I have to come forward, officially, tell the FBI who I really am, admit to everything I've done, and offer to testify against Blackstone in exchange for immunity. Marcus felt his heart stop. Elena, no. If you do that. If I do that, Elena Martinez disappears forever. Elena Singh becomes a federal witness. I lose the life I've built, the identity I've created, the safety I've had for 5 years. Elena looked at him with tears in her eyes. But your company survives. Well, your reputation is restored. Maybe, if we're very lucky, we bring down some very bad people in the process. I won't let you sacrifice yourself for my company. It's not just your company, Marcus. It's your life, your future, everything you've worked for. And it's bigger than that. If Blackstone gets away with this, they'll do it again to someone else. How many other people are they going to destroy to protect their secrets? Marcus stood up and began pacing Elena's tiny living room. There has to be another way, some way to expose them without destroying yourself in the process. Like what? I don't know. We find legitimate evidence. We get someone on the inside to come forward. Marcus. Elena's voice was gentle but firm. We've been over this. Blackstone has been covering their tracks for years. The only evidence that can bring them down is evidence I obtained illegally. And the only way that evidence becomes credible is if I come forward as the person who obtained it. What about David Chen? Could he help? David helped me once because he believed in second chances. But if I come forward now, his career is over too. He'll be investigated for helping a federal fugitive, for falsifying documents, for obstruction of justice. I can't ask him to sacrifice himself for me. Marcus felt trapped, desperate, like every option available to them led to losing Elena in one way or another. What if we run? He asked suddenly. Both of us. Tonight, we liquidate what we can, take Elena's insurance database, and disappear. New identities, new life. Somewhere Blackstone can't find us. Elena's smile was sad and grateful. Marcus, you have no idea how much it means to me that you would even consider that. But you can't just disappear. You're not some college dropout hacker. You're Marcus Wellington. Your face is on magazine covers. Your company employs thousands of people. Your father built an empire that bears your family name. You can't just walk away from all of that. Watch me. And what about Wellington Tech? What about all your employees? All the people whose livelihoods depend on the company surviving this crisis? What about the clients who trust you? The investors who believed in your vision? You'd abandon all of them? Marcus wanted to say yes, wanted to tell her that none of it mattered more than keeping her safe. But Elena was right. He couldn't just disappear without consequences that rippled out to touch thousands of other lives. So what do we do? He asked, feeling helpless. Elena stood up and crossed to him, taking his hands in hers. We do what we should have done from the beginning. We trust each other. We face this together. And we make sure that when the dust settles, the truth wins. Even if it costs us everything. Even if it costs us everything. That night, Elena made the call. She contacted David Chen first, explaining the situation and apologizing for what was about to happen to his career. Chen listened in silence, then sighed deeply. I wondered when this day would come, he said. Elena, are you sure this is what you want to do? It's what I have to do. All right. I'll make some calls. See if I can arrange for you to surrender voluntarily rather than being arrested. And Elena, for what it's worth, I'm proud of you. 5 years ago, you were a scared kid lashing out at the world. Now you're a woman willing to sacrifice everything to do the right thing. Next, Elena called the FBI field office handling the Wellington Tech investigation. She asked to speak to Agent Sarah Morrison, the lead investigator, and spoke words that would change everything. My name is Elena Singh. I think you've been looking for me. The next morning, Elena Singh walked into FBI headquarters in downtown Seattle, wearing her best dress and carrying a flash drive containing 5 years' worth of evidence against Blackstone Defense and their co-conspirators. Marcus wanted to go with her, but Elena had insisted this was something she had to do alone. I need them to see that I'm coming forward voluntarily, she'd said. That I'm not being coerced or manipulated. This has to be my choice. So Marcus waited in his penthouse apartment, surrounded by lawyers and crisis management specialists and board members demanding answers. He waited for word about the woman he loved and the future they might or might not have together. The call came at 3:15 in the afternoon. "Marcus?" Elena's voice was tired but determined. "It's done." "Are you okay? Are you under arrest?" "I'm custody, but not under arrest." "Exactly. They're calling me a cooperating witness. Agent Morrison says that if my information checks out, if it leads to successful prosecutions, they'll recommend immunity from prosecution for my past crimes." Marcus felt like he could breathe for the first time in days. "And the information?" "They're very interested in what I have to show them. Apparently, the FBI has been investigating Blackstone for months, but they haven't been able to penetrate their security or find solid evidence of wrongdoing. My database. It's like giving them a roadmap to everything they've been looking for." "What happens now?" "Now I spend the next few weeks in debriefing sessions, helping federal prosecutors build cases against very powerful people. And Marcus, they're dropping the investigation into Wellington Tech. Agent Morrison says it's clear that your company was targeted specifically to discredit me, and that all the evidence against you was fabricated." Marcus closed his eyes, feeling relief wash over him like a tide. "Elena, you did it. You actually did it. We did it. Together. When do you get to come home?" Elena was quiet for a moment. "That's complicated. Even if the immunity deal goes through, even if my cooperation leads to successful prosecutions, Elena Singh is going to be a public figure now, a federal witness in a high-profile case. I can't just go back to working in a coffee shop and pretending to be someone else." Marcus felt something cold settle in his stomach. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that Elena Martinez is dead. She died the moment I walked into this building, and I don't know yet who Elena Singh is going to become." That evening, while Elena was in federal protective custody and Marcus was dealing with the media circus surrounding Wellington Tech's exoneration, David Chen called Marcus directly. "She did the right thing," Chen said without preamble. "But she's going to need support getting through what comes next. The kind of support that goes beyond what the federal government can provide." "What do you mean?" "I mean that testifying against people like Blackstone's executives is dangerous, even with federal protection. I mean that rebuilding a life in the public eye after 5 years of hiding is going to be traumatic. And I mean that Elena is going to need someone who loves her enough to stick around through all of that." "I'm not going anywhere." "Good, because she's going to try to push you away. She's going to convince herself that she's too damaged, too dangerous, too complicated for someone like you. She's going to try to sacrifice her own happiness to protect yours." "Not if I have anything to say about it." Chen was quiet for a moment. "You know, in 5 years of helping people disappear, I've never seen someone choose to reappear for love. Elena Singh is a remarkable woman, Mr. Wellington. Don't let her convince you otherwise." The trials began 6 months later. Elena's testimony was devastating, comprehensive, and absolutely credible. Backed by 5 years of meticulously gathered evidence, She painted a picture of corruption that reached from corporate boardrooms to congressional offices to the highest levels of federal agencies. Blackstone Defense's executives were arrested on charges ranging from fraud to treason to conspiracy to commit murder. Their co-conspirators, politicians, regulators, other corporate executives fell like dominoes as Elena's evidence revealed the scope of their network. The media called it the Phantom Files scandal. Elena, now using her real name and no longer hiding her identity, became a reluctant public figure. She testified before congressional committees, gave carefully controlled interviews to major news outlets, and worked with federal prosecutors to ensure that the evidence she'd gathered was used to maximum effect. Through it all, Marcus was by her side. It wasn't easy. Elena struggled with the transition from anonymity to public scrutiny. She had nightmares about her years underground, panic attacks triggered by unexpected photographers, moments of profound doubt about whether exposing her past had been worth the cost. "I feel like I'm living someone else's life," she confided to Marcus one evening after a particularly grueling day of testimony. Elena Martinez was safe, anonymous, normal. Elena Singh is this. A federal witness, a media curiosity, a symbol of something I never wanted to symbolize. "You're also the woman who brought down the biggest corruption scandal in decades," Marcus reminded her. "You're the person who chose truth over safety, justice over comfort. You're someone who changed the world." What if I don't want to change the world? What if I just want to make coffee and read books and live quietly with someone I love? Marcus pulled her against him, holding her tight. "Then that's what we'll do. After this is over, after the trials are finished, after the media finds something else to focus on, we'll figure out how to build the quiet life you want. You promise?" "I promise." 1 year after Elena Singh walked into FBI headquarters, the last of the Blackstone conspirators was sentenced to federal prison. The corruption network that had operated for decades was finally dismantled. Elena's cooperation had led to convictions that would have been impossible without her evidence. But the victory came with a cost. Elena's life as Elena Martinez was gone forever. Her safety depended on federal protection protocols that meant limited travel, restricted privacy, constant awareness of potential threats from the powerful people she'd helped put in prison. "I don't regret it," she told Marcus one evening as they sat in their new apartment, larger than Elena's old place, but still modest by Marcus's standards, still decorated with her books and plants and the mismatched coffee mugs that had somehow survived the transition between identities. "But I didn't realize how much I'd miss being nobody special." "You've never been nobody special," Marcus said. "Not to me." Elena smiled, curling up against his side on their couch. "What happens now?" "Now we figure out what comes next. Together. Any ideas?" Marcus was quiet for a moment, thinking about conversations they'd had over the past year, about purpose and responsibility, and what it meant to build something worthwhile. "Actually, yes. What would you think about starting a foundation? Something focused on digital privacy rights, protection for whistleblowers, support for people trying to rebuild their lives after coming forward about corruption. Elena looked up at him with surprise. That's exactly what the world needs. But Marcus, are you sure? Running a foundation like that would mean constant scrutiny, political pressure, people trying to discredit our work. Sounds like a normal Tuesday for us at this point. Elena laughed, the same laugh that had made Marcus stop his car outside a coffee shop more than a year ago. You know what? I think that sounds perfect. Oh. 6 months later, the Wellington Singh Foundation for Digital Justice opened its doors in a converted warehouse in Seattle's Capitol Hill neighborhood. The space included offices for their staff, a resource center for whistleblowers and their families, and, in a touch that made Elena laugh every time she walked past it, a small coffee bar where they served ethically sourced beans, and Elena occasionally worked behind the counter just because she missed the ritual. The Foundation's first major initiative was creating secure communication channels for people trying to expose corporate corruption without destroying their own lives in the process. Their second was providing legal and financial support for federal witnesses dealing with the aftermath of high-profile testimony. It's like we're building a bridge, Elena explained to Marcus one evening as they reviewed grant applications from people seeking the Foundation's help. A bridge between the underground world, where people fight corruption in secret, and the legitimate world, where change happens through proper channels. A bridge that you're uniquely qualified to build, Marcus pointed out. That we're uniquely qualified to build, Elena corrected. I understand the underground world, but you understand how to operate in legitimate spaces, how to build sustainable institutions, how to make change that lasts. Marcus looked around their shared office, at the walls covered with thank you letters from people they'd helped, at Elena bent over her laptop working on a policy proposal that could revolutionize whistleblower protections, at the life they'd built together from the ashes of everything they'd lost. You know what I've realized? He said. What's that? David Chen was right. Some people are worth changing your whole life for. But what he didn't mention is that sometimes, when you change your life for someone else, you discover that the new life is better than the old one ever was. Elena looked up from her laptop and smiled. Not the careful, professional smile she wore for interviews and congressional testimony, but the real one. The one that was just for him. Even though dating me cost you a company worth billions of dollars? Even though dating you cost me a company worth billions of dollars, got me investigated by the FBI, and turned me into a public figure in the biggest corruption scandal of the century, Marcus confirmed. Best investment I ever made. Elena saved her work and crossed the office to kiss him, soft and sweet, and tasting like possibility. You know what I love most about this? She asked against his lips. What? We're not running anymore. Not from the past, not from the truth, not from people who want to hurt us. For the first time in my adult life, I get to stand still and build something instead of always preparing to tear it down and disappear. Outside their office windows, Seattle sparkled in the gathering dusk, full of stories and secrets and people trying to figure out how to make the world a little bit better. In the distance, they could see the lights of Been There. Done That, where their story had begun with a $3.50 cup of coffee and two people brave enough to tell each other the truth. But this wasn't really the end of their story. It was just the end of the beginning, the end of running, of hiding, of pretending to be people they weren't. What came next was the harder, better work of building something real together, one choice at a time, one day at a time, one act of courage at a time. Because the best love stories don't end with happily ever after. They end with, and then they kept choosing each other, through every storm and every sunshine, through every victory and every loss, through every moment when it would have been easier to give up. Marcus and Elena kept choosing each other. When the media scrutiny became overwhelming, when death threats arrived from supporters of the people they'd helped convict, when Elena woke up in the middle of the night, reliving her years underground, when Marcus struggled with the transition from corporate CEO to nonprofit director, when federal agents called with news of new threats, through all of it, they kept choosing each other. Not because it was easy, because it was worth it. And in the end, that's what love really is. Not finding someone perfect, but finding someone whose imperfections fit perfectly with your own. Someone whose broken pieces help you understand how to heal your own. Someone whose courage inspires you to be braver than you ever thought possible. Some stories begin with "once upon a time." Others begin with a billionaire walking into a coffee shop on a Tuesday morning, looking for something he didn't even know he'd lost. This story began with both, and it continues every morning when Marcus and Elena wake up in their shared apartment, look at each other across their shared breakfast table, and choose to keep building their shared life together. Because the most powerful force in the world isn't money or technology or government authority. It's two people deciding that love is stronger than fear, truth is stronger than lies, and hope is stronger than everything that tries to destroy it. That's the real story. That's the one worth telling. And that's the one that never really ends. It just keeps beginning, again and again. Every day they choose each other over everything else the world offers them. Forever and always, one cup of perfectly made coffee at a time.